Stability always looks more attractive when you are broke and alone. My wife vanished with $80,000 to find herself. A year later, she came back wanting to be my wife again. But when she saw who answered my door, the truth hit her like a physical blow. She realized she no longer belonged in my life. When it all happened, the shock was so abrupt that even today, the memory sneaks up on me. It still surprises me how clearly I can recall that morning. I walked into the kitchen, and there it was, a handwritten note next to the coffee maker. There was no attempt at conversation, no explanation, not even the decency of a real goodbye. Just a brief, sterile message saying she needed to find herself and that I shouldn't wait. That pathetic sheet of paper was placed next to a detail that felt much worse, much colder. Half the closet was empty. Her car was gone from the garage, and $80,000 had been gutted from our joint account. I'm Adrian Lausan, just turned 50, and I thought I had a decades-long marriage with Elle, along with 2 adult children, Arno and Mel, who were already building their own lives. For years, I genuinely thought I had everything under control, nailed down. My car wash business practically ran itself, for high-end locations scattered around the county brought in stable monthly income while my managers handled the daily chaos. My days used to be so simple. Wake up, check the figures on my phone, maybe visit one of the spots if I was bored, and then take care of the house or plan our next family trip. A predictable, easy life. Ellie worked in real estate. She was sharp, tireless, always closing deals or attending events to expand her contacts. I felt nothing but pride for her dedication. She'd arrive home late, perfumed with the cloying scent of cheap wine and open house appetizers. And when I'd ask her how her day had been, she'd kiss my cheek and just say, "Exhausting," before heading up to shower. I never, not once, doubted her words. Why would I? I didn't see a single reason for suspicion. But that March morning, with that piece of paper trembling in my hand, my world utterly collapsed. I spent weeks trying to find her. I called her dozens of times, all straight to voicemail. I drove to her office, only to learn from a colleague that she'd requested indefinite leave. It was the children's reaction that really threw me, though. Every time I asked them if they knew anything about their mother, they refused to look me in the eye. Arno, especially, became defensive, insinuating that I should give her space, as if I were the origin of the whole mess. Much later, I realized the painful truth of what they were hiding. They were sending her money, helping her finance what was clearly an expensive existential crisis, while I was left trying to sustain the tattered remnants of the family we had. 3 months after she left, I gave up counting the days. I stopped checking my mobile every minute, waiting for a message that was never going to arrive. I forced myself to continue with the routine, washing, checking the business numbers, meticulously taking care of the house. The lawn needed constant mowing. The gutters were choked with leaves. The fence had a loose board that I perpetually postponed fixing. It was during that numb stage that I realized someone new had moved into the rental house across the street. At first, I didn't pay much attention. I was too wrapped up in my own silence. But one morning, while watering the flower beds Elise used to tend, I saw a woman climb out of a somewhat battered Honda Civic. Dark hair pulled into a ponytail, a coffee cup in one hand, keys in the other. She was wearing a hospital uniform. She gave me a quick wave, and I returned the courtesy, not wanting to engage in any forced neighborhood small talk. Over time, I learned her name was Anike, that she worked as an ICU nurse at the county memorial, and that her shifts were as extensive as they were utterly exhausting. She was 35, unmarried, and lived alone in a house that felt too big for one person. It mirrored how I felt, though I wouldn't have admitted it out loud. Initially, we just exchanged nods and brief greetings. She'd leave for work when I checked the mailbox, or I'd take out the trash when she returned at dawn. Nothing more than simple politeness between strangers. Until one Saturday, I was changing the oil in my truck in the garage when Anike crossed the street with a plate covered in aluminum foil. "I've made homemade cookies," she said, her kindness so simple it was disarming. "I think they'll be good for you." She set the plate on my tool table and added, "They're chocolate chip. Fair warning, some are a bit toasted on the bottom." I wiped my hands and just stared at her. There was no attempt at flirting, no poorly disguised curiosity. It was a sincere, honest gesture. That small detail affected me more than I could have imagined. "Thanks," I managed to rasp out. "I'm Adrian." "I know," she said with a slight smile. "I've seen your name on the mailbox. I'm Anike." I tried to inject some humor, mentioning that her uniform already gave away her profession. Her laugh was authentic, a sound I hadn't heard in my garden for months. We talked for a few minutes. I told her I owned the car washes, and that even though my managers handled almost everything, it only left me with a ridiculous amount of time to think more than was healthy. Anike looked at me, not with pity, but with a deep, silent understanding. "If you ever need to vent out loud," she offered, "I'm usually free Wednesday mornings, and I make pretty decent coffee." She didn't wait for an answer. She walked back to her house, leaving behind a plate of slightly burnt cookies and a strange, comforting feeling that maybe life hadn't completely stopped, after all. I ate 3 before noon. Despite her warning, they were perfect. When the next Wednesday rolled around, I crossed the street without a concrete plan, operating purely on the intuition that I'd spent too much time isolated with my thoughts. Anik's coffee was strong, almost corrosive, served in mismatched mugs she'd bought at flea markets. She sat in a worn armchair across from me and went straight for the jugular. "What's your story, Adrian?" I appreciated her frankness. There was no beating around the bush. "My wife left almost 4 months ago," I replied, feeling the words still heavy in my throat. I took a deep breath, surprised by how easily the brutal truth came out. She left a note on the counter. Nothing else. Half our savings disappeared with her. Not one explanation. She just wrote she needed to find herself. I recounted the details with a mix of weary bitterness. Anike listened, nodding slowly, her face completely free of judgment. "That's hard. Have you heard anything from her since?" "Not a single word," I replied. I suspect my children knew more than they admitted, preferring to keep silent to protect her. I took a long drink of the cold, bitter coffee, which perfectly mirrored the situation. Arno, my son, behaved as if I were the villain just for wanting answers. And my daughter, Mel, burst into tears every time we talked about it, always repeating that mom needed space. "Space from what exactly?" Anike asked, zeroing in. "That's the great, crushing unknown," I murmured, putting the cup down. 26 years of marriage. And according to her, I was suffocating her without even realizing it. Anike was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that completely took me by surprise. "My father died last year. Cancer. I was his caregiver until the end. I attended him at home during the hospice process." "I'm truly sorry," I replied, meaning it. She continued, her tone careful. "Your brother? I attended him 3 years ago. Another hospital, another unit. But I remember you visited him every day in his last week." The atmosphere immediately changed. I looked at her, fitting the pieces together. "So, you knew who I was since you moved in?" "I recognized you," she admitted. "But I didn't know if you'd remember my face, too. We only coincided a few times in the hallways. I'm sorry for not mentioning it before." I tried to process that, searching for anger or a sense of betrayal, but found neither. "Why tell me just now?" "Because you deserve honesty," she explained simply. "And because I don't want to build a friendship on something left unsaid. Your brother was a good man. You were with him when it really mattered. That says a lot about you." I swallowed, feeling a lump in my throat. He was the better of the two brothers, no doubt. Anike smiled softly. "I doubt that quite a bit, but if it helps you to think so, go ahead." Despite the horrible coffee, the morning ended up feeling less heavy than when I'd arrived. July brought suffocating heat, and the car washes were running overtime. Demand grew nonstop, and my managers were juggling schedules to keep everything running. I should have been focused on numbers, capitalizing on the high season. But instead, the only thing I looked forward to was Wednesday mornings with Anike. It became a habit we didn't even have to plan. She finished her night shift Wednesdays at 7 a.m., slept until noon, and I'd show up with pastries from the downtown bakery. We'd sit on her back deck and talk about anything and everything. She told me stories of difficult patience, of the emotional wear of watching people fade despite every effort. I spoke to her about Arno's increasingly hostile phone calls and Mel's crippling silences, heavy with guilt. "Your children are in a terrible spot," she said one day, resting her bare feet on the railing. "They love both of you, but it's likely their mother has painted a picture of you that isn't fair." "And what version would that be?" I asked, frustration boiling over. "I worked hard, supported our family. I never cheated, never raised my voice. What exactly did I do so wrong?" "Maybe that's the whole problem," she replied quietly. "You're stable, predictable, safe. There are some people who mistake that for boring." It hurt because it resonated with the awful ring of truth. Elise used to call me her rock. At what exact moment did a rock go from being a foundation of support to becoming something to flee from? One afternoon in late July, I was replacing some rotten boards on her deck when Anike came out with 2 beers. She'd had 3 days off, looked rested, and seemed lighter than air. "You really don't have to fix everything in my house," she commented, handing me one. "I can hire someone, you know." "I know," I replied. "I'm just testing the board stability, but honestly, working with my hands clears my head. It helps me avoid thinking too much." Anike sat on the steps next to my toolbox. "Can I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead. Do you do all this because you're actively trying to move on, or because deep down, you're still waiting for Elle to return?" I stopped and stared at her. 2 months ago, I would have sworn I was waiting for her. Now, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. "That's valid," she replied. She took a sip and added, "And for what my opinion is worth, I think what comes next can be much, much better than what you left behind." That night upon returning home, I looked at the photographs on my dresser. Elle and I on our wedding day, young, naive, completely convinced we had life figured out. I took the photo and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't done out of rage, but out of quiet, firm acceptance. Some chapters simply close, even if you're not ready for the final page. It happened on a Tuesday night in late September, nearly a year after Elise walked out. I was organizing tools in the garage. Anike was inside making dinner. She insisted I eat something other than sandwiches or fast food. We had developed a natural, easy comfort between us. She had a toothbrush in my bathroom, and I had a key to her house, just in case. Nothing official, no labels, just two people who had found something precious. My phone vibrated on the workbench. Unknown number, but the message preview tightened my stomach before I even opened it. I've had my time to have fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again. Can we talk? No greeting. No apology. Nothing. As if she'd been on some extended vacation and now wanted to return because it was getting cold outside, and she suddenly remembered she owned a house. I looked at the screen until it went dark, then lit it up again, unable to believe her arrogance. A year of absolute silence, and that was the line she chose. Anike appeared in the garage door frame, wiping her hands on a towel. Dinner is almost ready. Are you coming, or should I bring you a plate here? I didn't answer. I simply handed her the phone. She read the message, and I watched her expression shift. First curiosity, then full understanding, and finally, something hard and firm. Do you plan to answer her? She asked with a neutral voice. No, I said, surprised by the absolute certainty in my tone. There's nothing left to say to her. She's going to insist, Anike warned. People like that don't accept silence. And she was right. Over the next 3 days, messages came one after the other. They grew more insistent, loaded with a mix of desperation and manipulation that felt sickeningly familiar. Each one was engineered to tug at a different thread to force a response. I made a mistake. Please, Adrian. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. The kids miss seeing us together. That last argument, using the kids, was the one that made my blood boil. She used them as leverage, as if Arno hadn't been secretly sending her money for months, as if Mel, perfectly informed, hadn't known exactly where her mother was while I was left alone, trying to rebuild a shredded life piece by piece. They had answers, and I was left with silence, paralyzing worry, and endless nights trying to understand why. Even so, I didn't answer any of the messages. I wasn't going to give her the power to drag me back into her cycle of chaos. Instead, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I called a lawyer, not just anyone, but an expert in complex divorces, especially those where one party had abandoned the marriage and appropriated common assets. The consultation was more revealing than I ever imagined. Claire Chun, my lawyer, a woman with a serene but rock-solid presence, reviewed every detail with surgical precision. Mr. Lausan, she said, organizing documents on her desk, you have a very solid position here. Prolonged abandonment, absolute lack of communication, withdrawal of funds without your consent. All of that favors you. She spoke with a clarity that left me stunned. For a whole year, I'd felt helpless, out of control, pushed into an emotional limbo. Hearing that the law was on my side brought back a feeling of stability I thought I'd lost forever. Stability, Claire continued. If she wants to reconcile, she added, making it clear this was procedure, not opinion. She'll have to do it through legal channels. And from what you've told me, it's advisable we start gathering proof of any possible extramarital affair. It would strengthen your case considerably. How do I do that? I asked, the question feeling like an admission of residual pain. She barely smiled. A private investigator. I work with a very competent one. Discreet, meticulous, and fast. If there's something to discover, he'll find it. That same day, I signed the agreement. I did it not out of resentment, but out of cold, hard self-protection. Anike had started to occupy an emotional space in my life that scared me enough to act prudently. I couldn't allow Elle to come waltzing back in and destroy all that with a simple claim or with the ease she used to manipulate everything. I needed to armor my life, my peace of mind, and what I was starting to build with Anike. When I got home, she was on my porch, still in her uniform after her shift. She stood up when she saw me, with that look that always seemed to read my soul before I could speak a word. I hired a lawyer, I said bluntly, and a private investigator. If she wants to come back, she'll have to discover it's already too late. Anike didn't ask for any additional explanation. She approached, put her arms around my shoulders, and held me with a warmth that was free of pretense. Sometimes you don't realize the weight you're carrying until someone offers to hold a part of it. I clung to her, feeling, for the first time in months, that I had permission to breathe. That night, I turned off the phone completely and shoved it in a drawer. Whatever Elise wanted to say, she could say it to Claire. I was officially retired from being her emotional safety net. The knock on the door came early one Saturday, 2 weeks after the first message. The sound was dry, insistent, almost demanding. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Anike was showering upstairs. The idea of a quiet Saturday vanished before I could even smell the fresh coffee. We'd spent the previous night going through old boxes in the attic, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. That cleaning felt symbolic, getting rid of what no longer had a place in the new life I was trying to build. The knocking repeated, louder this time. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. When I finally did, there stood Elise, perfectly groomed, as if she'd come for a photo shoot, not to face the rubble she'd created. Flawless hair, impeccable makeup, designer clothes. Her appearance showed no trace of the years she'd spent away. She seemed rested, almost radiant, as if the chaos she left behind had never touched her. I didn't open the door. I stayed watching her with an emotional distance that even surprised me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt absolutely nothing. It was like observing a stranger, one who, by some strange accident, had once been in my life for 26 years. The shower stopped upstairs. I heard Anike move, probably drying her hair. Elle knocked again. Adrian, I know you're there. I see your truck. Please, I just want to talk. I approached, but didn't turn the knob. You have to go, Elle? There's nothing to talk about. Her voice adopted that sickening, manipulative tonality she used when she wanted to control a situation. I made a mistake. I was confused. I needed to think, but now I'm clear. I want to come home. This isn't your home anymore, I said, my voice low but granting no space for misunderstanding. You left with $80,000 and disappeared for a whole year without a single word. You don't get to return just because it's convenient for you now. There was a silence, then a desperate, grasping attempt. Adrian, please. I've always loved you. I just lost my way. I was about to answer, but I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Anike appeared on the landing wearing one of my t-shirts, her hair damp, and understood everything the moment she saw the scene. Do you want me to open it? She asked softly, without fear or doubt. Yes, I replied. It'll be better this way. Anike opened the door without hesitation. Elise's expression utterly collapsed, as if someone had cut an invisible string holding her up. Her eyes immediately dropped to Anique's belly, where the soft curve of her 5 months of pregnancy was already noticeable. We had only discovered it 3 weeks before. This sight explained everything. The messages, the sudden insistence, the panicked interest. The color drained from Elle's face. Literally, her skin went pale, tense, as if she'd been physically struck. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Can I help you with something? Anike asked, her voice firm, neither aggressive nor presumptuous, just centered. Who are you? Elise managed to murmur. I'm Anike, she replied, and you must go. Adrian has already made it clear he doesn't want to talk to you. Ellie tried to seek my eyes behind Anike, but I was already walking toward the kitchen. I heard Anike close the door calmly and lock it without theatrics, without haste. I looked out the window and saw Ellie stand there for several seconds, completely undone, her posture rigid, her personal world crumbling in real time. Finally, she turned and walked back to her car with short, wobbly steps, unable to assimilate what she'd just witnessed. Anike came into the kitchen and leaned next to me. Are you okay? She asked. The answer surprised me. Yes, I said. And for the first time, it was absolutely true. I'm really okay. 2 days after that scene, Arno showed up at my door, and he didn't come alone. His wife, Sophie, was with him, and from the tension in her expression, I knew she was the one who had pushed for the visit. Something was coming. And that day, I realized the story wasn't over yet. I was in my driveway dedicating Sunday morning to washing one of my cars, a habit I'd kept for years. It helped me clear my mind before the week began. I didn't see the tension coming until I heard firm footsteps behind me. We have to talk, Dad, Arno said. His face hardened, his tone barely containing anger. He was 27, but in that instant, he behaved like a teenager blindly defending his mother. I turned off the hose tap and turned around, completely calm. What do you want to talk about? I asked. About how you've replaced Mom as if she never existed. He fired, not thinking. About how you brought a stranger into her house and got her pregnant. What the hell are you thinking? I inhaled deeply before answering. First, this is my house. Your mother left over a year ago of her own free will. Second, Anike isn't a stranger and isn't replacing anyone. She and I are building something new. Something your mother decided to destroy when she left. Sophie immediately intervened with her usual abrupt, accusatory tone. She made a mistake, she insisted. Anyone can make a mistake. You don't destroy a marriage just for that. I shook my head, looking at them one by one. Your mother didn't make a mistake, Sophie. She made decisions. She chose to leave. Chose to take $80,000 from our accounts. Chose to disappear for a whole year without saying a word. That's not a stumble. That is a conscious choice. Arno took a step closer. You don't know what she was going through, he countered. She felt invisible, scared of aging. She needed support, not for you to judge her. My patience started to fray. I was her husband for 26 years, I replied. I supported her in every way I knew how. I worked hard so we'd have a stable life. I was never unfaithful, never lied to her. If she was going through something, she could have talked to me. But no, she preferred to disappear with money that wasn't just hers. Sophie let out a bitter, cutting laugh. It was marital property. She had a right to take it, she blurted out. Not without warning she was leaving, I replied. Not emptying accounts in the middle of the night like a thief. And certainly not while you two were secretly financing her. Arno's face flushed crimson. She's our mother. We were helping her get by. She was getting by from day one, I affirmed, unwavering. She just decided she didn't want to go on with me. And I'm fine with that. I already accepted our story ended. What I won't tolerate is you coming to my door to pressure me to take her back, as if I were responsible for what she shattered with her choices. Sophie pointed toward the kitchen window, where Anike was moving, preparing something to drink. That baby changes nothing, she spat coldly. Legally, you're still married to Arno's mother. This is adultery, and in the divorce, it's going to count heavily. I crossed my arms, maintaining a serene tone. Believe me, Claire has already reviewed all of that. A whole year of abandonment puts me in a very solid legal position. And if we're going to talk about infidelity, maybe you should ask your mother-in-law what she was doing during that year. I have a complete report. The private investigator doesn't leave loose ends. You hired an investigator. The shock was palpable. I protected myself, I replied. Something I should have done a long time ago. And now, if you're done trying to intimidate me in my own home, I have things to do. This doesn't end here, Dad, Arno said, though the conviction had bled out of his voice. Mom is already talking to her lawyer. I'm not getting rid of anyone, I answered. She excluded herself when she decided to leave. I'm just closing a process. Now, please get off my property before I call the police for trespassing. After a moment of agonizing hesitation, Sophie ended up dragging Arno toward the car. I stayed watching them drive away before going back inside the house. Anike was sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a cup. I heard almost everything, she murmured. Are you feeling okay? I sat across from her, finally feeling the sheer weight of everything. I'm tired, I admitted. Tired of having to defend myself for having moved on. Tired of being painted as the villain for not waiting for her to return, as if nothing happened. Anike took my hand gently. Your son is being manipulated by Elle, she said calmly. In time, he'll see it. Maybe, I replied. But for now, he's choosing to be on her side, and I have to learn to live with that grief. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Claire, and told her every detail of the visit and Sophie's pathetic threats. She assured me everything was proceeding according to plan and that Elle's lawyer hadn't presented any serious objection yet. She's trying to buy time, Claire explained. She thinks you're going to yield if she pressures you. Don't do it. We have the advantage, and she knows it. 3 weeks after that volatile scene, I received a message I genuinely didn't expect. It didn't come with demands or reproaches, but with a surprisingly calm tone. It was from my daughter, Mel. It read, "Can we meet for coffee? Just you and me." I accepted immediately. We met in a small downtown cafe on a cold November morning when the air smelled of damp leaves and winter felt like it was rushing in too fast. When I arrived, she was already sitting in a booth at the back, huddled against the wall as if trying to hide from the entire world. Her shoulders were hunched, and her hands were intertwined in her lap, moving restlessly. In the dim light, I could see the painful contrast on her face, accentuating the nervousness she was trying to contain. Mel's expression was a heartbreaking mix of remorse, tiredness, and a guilt that felt too heavy for someone her age. At 25, working as a primary school teacher, she had always been the one trying to glue the family back together when it cracked. As a child, she stopped arguments by repeating, "We should all listen to each other." As an adult, she remained that soft voice, always urging others to yield, even if she carried the emotional cost herself. When she saw me approach, she straightened her back. Despite the evident anguish, she gave me a weak smile. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she whispered as soon as I sat across from her, as if fearing I might have rejected her. "You'll always have my time," I replied, firm and serene. "I'm your father, and that doesn't change." Her eyes moistened almost instantly, as if those simple words had knocked down the final wall she was clinging to. She swallowed hard, struggling to keep her composure. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, sucking in air so she wouldn't break down entirely. "I should have sought you out sooner. I should have defended your position when Arno behaved so terribly toward you." I took a deep breath. Hearing that apology, so honest and so loaded with weight, impacted me more than she could ever know. "You weren't in an easy situation," I told her, trying to ease the burden she was carrying, but she shook her head. "No, Dad. I was a coward." She said it with a self-directed harshness that worried me. "Mom called me right after seeing that woman, Anike, at the house. She was beside herself, saying you'd betrayed her, that you'd moved on too fast. And I just listened. I never told her what I should have, that she had no right to be angry." Her voice suddenly acquired a frightening firmness, a clarity born of indignation that had accumulated over time. "She was the one who left you," she exclaimed, in a low voice, but with contained rage. "She left without explanations. Disappeared for over a year. What did she expect? That you freeze your life? That you wait for her like some kind of emotional waiting room?" A physical part of my chest loosened for the first time in a long while. Mel was seeing things with a brutal clarity I'd needed to hear for years. "Did you know where she was?" I asked, not with reproach, just needing to understand. Mel lowered her gaze, tearing at the edge of a napkin between her fingers. "I knew something," she admitted, discreetly wiping away tears. "She called me a couple of times. Told me she was in California, trying to clear her head. Nothing more. She never mentioned any man, but Arno told me later that yes, she'd been with someone. And when that romance ended, suddenly she wanted to return, as if you were waiting on pause. That was exactly what it was, I murmured, stating a fact without a trace of bitterness. I'm ashamed to have sent her money, she continued. Both Arno and I did, and we didn't tell you. We knew it felt wrong, but deep down, I think we wanted to believe you weren't as bad as she made you out to be, that she hadn't hurt you so much. And I know we were contributing to her continuing to hurt you. I'm truly sorry. I extended my hand over the table and gently covered hers. Her skin trembled slightly. Mel, you love your mother. I understand. I never asked you to take sides. She shook her head slowly, as if she'd been agonizing over this for weeks. But this time I choose. If I choose, Dad, I choose to tell you the truth. Last week, I overheard Mom talking. Her face hardened. She was laughing at you. She called you predictable and boring. She said, you were a stable income, but she needed to feel young and excited again. And when I asked why she wanted to return now, Mom answered, because stability always looks better when you're broke and alone. This time, I felt no pain. There was no surge of anger, no sharp indignation. Just a quiet, devastating confirmation of something I'd known for far too long. Elise never loved me for who I was, but for what I represented. And when that stopped serving her, she looked for something she thought was more exciting. Losing that something, she simply ran back to the only shelter she knew was safe. That must have been hard to hear, I told her. It turned my stomach, Mel admitted, looking down. And it also made me understand something crucial. Anike isn't stealing you from Mom. Mom was the one who discarded you. Anike just had the clarity to see the value of what she let go. We continued talking for over an hour. At times, she cried. At times, she laughed nervously. She confessed that the conflict between her mother and me had forced her to question her own relationships. She had ended things with her partner of 3 years because she realized she was accepting far less than she deserved. You taught me that, Dad, she told me, squeezing my hand. Seeing you say no when Mom tried to return. Seeing how you defended your well-being above everyone's expectations, that takes real courage. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, I felt like I had recovered my daughter, but not the little girl I had raised, but an adult woman I now saw clearly, one who understood, and who had finally dared to take a definitive stand. The day of the trial arrived in mid-February, an especially cold and gray morning. One of those days where the sky hangs low like an oppressive ceiling. 8 months had passed since Elle's first desperate attempt to return. 8 months of documents, phone calls, tense silences, and the final acceptance that this chapter of my life was about to be closed for good. My lawyer, Claire, had explained everything in detail. But no amount of preparation can shield you from the emotional impact of sitting across from someone with whom you shared half a lifetime. Elle entered the room impeccably dressed, in an elegant coat and perfectly applied makeup. But beneath that polished exterior, the accumulated tiredness and defeat were visible in her eyes. Beside her was her lawyer, Olivier Puna, known for defending wealthy spouses. I knew Elle had turned to him to try and salvage something from a marriage that had been dead long before she acknowledged it. I sat with Claire and Anike. She was 8 months pregnant, her belly prominent, making every baby movement evident. Even so, she insisted on accompanying me from the first instant. I want to be here, she told me that morning. You were with me, so I'll be with you. The judge presiding over the case, Franny Sill, was a practical, direct woman with no time for unnecessary drama. She reviewed the documents for a few seconds before looking up. Looks like a case of uncomplicated abandonment, she said. Mrs. Lausanne, you left the marital home in March of last year and had no contact with your husband for 12 months. Is that correct? Elise didn't answer. She swallowed, barely moving her head toward her lawyer. Olivier stood up. Your Honor, he began. My client was going through an emotional crisis. She needed time to recover. She is now willing to reconcile and attend marriage counseling. The judge turned her gaze toward me. Mr. Lausanne, do you wish to reconcile? I stood up, feeling the immense weight of the decision, but also the absolute certainty of what I had to say. No, Your Honor. I have rebuilt my life. I am expecting a child with my partner, and I wish for this marriage to be legally dissolved. Olivier intervened immediately. My client has a right to 50% of the marital assets, including Mr. Lausanne's businesses and retirement accounts. Claire, with her signature tranquility, replied, Your Honor, we have proof Mrs. Lausanne withdrew $80,000 from joint accounts without my client's consent shortly before abandoning the marriage. Furthermore, we have documentation demonstrating multiple infidelities by Mrs. Lausanne during the last 3 years, including a year-long relationship with a man named Benoit Hastings while they still lived under the same roof. Elle's face immediately lost all color. Her lips trembled violently. She knew exactly who Claire was talking about. Benoit wasn't a stranger to me. He was a real estate investor I'd seen at various conferences and with whom Elise eventually got involved. "Is there proof of these claims?" asked the judge, in a strictly professional tone. Claire handed over a thick dossier. Everything was there: hotel receipts, messages recovered from the cloud, archived emails, even statements from coworkers who knew about the affair. The judge reviewed the content in absolute silence. Only the slight sound of pages turning was heard, and in the distance, a court clerk typing. Elie's lawyer started to object, but Franny raised her hand to stop him without raising her voice. "Mrs. Lausanne," she said finally, her voice cold, "the actions you describe as mistakes are not. They are conscious decisions prolonged over time. Is this information correct?" She looked first at her lawyer, then at me. Her face crumpled in a gesture mixing shame and resignation, and without summoning the strength to lie or offer a justification, she looked down. She didn't say a word. My lawyer had just closed her argument when the judge reviewed the file one last time. The severe expression on her face left no room for doubt. "I've heard enough," the judge declared, closing the folder with a snap. "I grant the divorce on the grounds of abandonment and adultery." She continued, "Mr. Lausanne will retain the entirety of his business assets and the primary residence. You, Mrs. Lausanne, will receive 15% of the marital assets generated during the union, less the $80,000 you withdrew unauthorized. All retirement accounts will remain under Mr. Lausanne's control as the principal contributor." "Your Honor, this isn't fair," her lawyer protested weakly. "What would be fair is for your client to return the stolen money and apologize for wasting this court's time." The judge replied with a sharp, final tone. "The divorce is approved. We are finished." Hearing those words, I had the strange, profound sensation that a cage door had finally opened. I left the courtroom with Anik's hand intertwined with mine, and every step out of that building felt like dropping a crushing weight that had accompanied me for years. Elise tried to seek my gaze when we passed through the hallway, but I didn't stop. There was nothing more to say. "How do you feel?" Anike asked when we reached the parking lot. "Free," I replied, the word escaping without effort. After more than a year, I felt truly free. That same afternoon, I called my lawyer to draft a completely new will. I left everything to Anike and our baby. Arno would receive nothing unless he fundamentally reconsidered his position someday, and even in that case, his access would be through a trust for my future grandchildren, never direct. Mel would have a significant inheritance because she had chosen truth and family over blind, enabling loyalty. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. It was about recognizing who had genuinely stayed by my side when it really counted. Weeks later, on a late March morning, our daughter Emma was born. She weighed a little more than 3 kilos and arrived in the world with dark hair and her mother's beautiful eyes. While Anike slept, exhausted after the delivery, I held her in my arms and felt a part of me that had been numb for years suddenly wake up. This was family, not obligation or appearances, but a real, chosen connection, built with intention and sincerity. As soon as she recovered a bit, Mel arrived with flowers and a small stuffed elephant she had carefully searched for. She became emotional seeing her, cried while holding her, and murmured that she never thought she'd have a baby sister. I told her she would be a wonderful sister, and I truly believed it. Emma was lucky to arrive in a life where someone was already fiercely willing to protect her from the first second. On the other side, the silence was absolute. Arno didn't call, didn't send a message, didn't show the minimal interest. Sophie, his partner, posted a snide comment on social media insinuating family betrayals, something Mel showed me. I let it go. Arno would discover the truth on his own sooner or later, or not at all. I could no longer live my life dependent on his toxic attitude. When we took Emma home, the whole household transformed. Anike had painted the room a soft yellow, and our neighbors organized a small celebration with practical gifts, diapers, clothes, blankets. The community wrapped around us in a way that made me feel, for the first time in a long while, that we truly belonged there. 10 months after the divorce was officially closed, I ran into Elise at a supermarket. She was alone, pushing a cart with minimal purchases. She seemed shrunken, as if life had drained something essential from her. "Adrian," she said, stopping upon seeing me with Emma against my chest in the carrier. "Elise," I replied, without giving the name any special intonation. "She's beautiful," she murmured with a broken voice. "Your daughter? Thanks. And I heard you and Anike got married last month." "Congratulations." "That's right," I nodded. "A small ceremony. Only close family and some friends." Mel was Anike's maid of honor. She stayed looking at me, as if searching for words she couldn't find. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. Emma started getting restless, and I adjusted the carrier strap. "I must go. Take care, Elle." I walked away without turning my head. There was no longer resentment, just quiet, final indifference. She was simply someone who had once been a part of my life, but who would never have any place in my future. Arriving home that afternoon, while unbuckling the carrier and Emma rested deeply against my shoulder, I was surprised by how light I felt. Not from joy, but from the total, blissful absence of weight. Closing a chapter doesn't always sound like victory. Sometimes it simply feels like being able to breathe again after a long time without doing it properly. Anike came out to the hall with a blanket in her hands. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking at me with that mix of curiosity and prudence she always had when she sensed something had stirred me. I looked at her. I answered, leaving Emma gently in her portable crib. It was Ely's. But nothing happened. It was a memory that no longer hurts. We stayed there a few seconds, observing our daughter as she slept with the absolute tranquility of one who doesn't yet know the world's harshness. It was impossible not to think about how far I'd come since everything collapsed. "You know," I said as we entered the living room, "sometimes I think I needed to hit bottom that way to finally understand who I really was. If I hadn't lost everything, perhaps I'd still be clinging to a version of myself that no longer represented me." Anike listened without interrupting, taking my hand gently. "You aren't defined by what you lived with her," she replied. "What you have now, you built, and you chose." Her words weren't cheap, improvised comfort, but a simple, profound truth. The life I had formed wasn't compensation. It was a conscious decision born of the terrifying clarity that came after having lost almost everything. Later, when the sun began to set, we sat on the porch as we used to do. Emma slept peacefully between us, wrapped in her small blanket, oblivious to the world. The garden smelled of damp earth and fresh-cut grass, and the orange sunset light illuminated the edge of the house. "Sometimes I wonder how everything would have been if nothing had broken," I murmured, my eyes fixed on the color-changing sky. "Maybe you never would have discovered what you truly deserved," Anike answered. And she was right. It wasn't about comparing a before and after, but about fully understanding that the life I had now was the fruit of difficult decisions, taken with open eyes. I breathed deep for the first time in a long while, completely free of shadows. I caressed Emma's forehead and felt her tiny fingers close around mine while she slept. "This," I said quietly, "is exactly the place I want to be. Not because I'd imagined it so from the beginning, but because after losing everything, I was able to rebuild myself without looking back. And that new version of my life, free of others' expectations and inherited guilt, was worth infinitely more than any past to which I could cling. The future was no longer uncertain terrain. It was a path I was finally choosing." After a year of calculated cruelty and betrayal, can a child's unwavering loyalty to a manipulative parent ever be genuinely forgiven? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments.